It usually doesn't start the way people imagine it would. There are no obvious signs, no direct confrontation, no clear moment where you can point and say, "This is where it began." Instead, it starts in silence, in conversations that feel slightly off, but not enough to question, in small shifts of tone that most people ignore because life is too busy to analyze every detail. But in this case, something is being constructed underneath that normal surface. A plan that doesn't announce itself, but slowly organizes itself through timing, behavior, and quiet agreement between people who think they understand the situation better than you do. From their perspective, it is not even personal at first. It is just a decision, a narrative they are building, a moment they believe will reveal something about you in front of others. And the strange part is how ordinary everything continues to look while this is forming. You are still included in conversations, still moving through interactions, still operating under the assumption that everything is neutral. While in reality, the environment around you is being subtly arranged. Certain people begin to align their attention differently. Certain moments are timed more deliberately, and certain reactions are mentally rehearsed before they ever happen out loud. Not in a chaotic way, but in a controlled one, where everything is designed to unfold naturally enough that it never looks planned. And because human behavior rarely exposes intention directly, you don't detect the structure behind it in real time. You only experience the surface of it, the normality, the casual energy, the familiar faces, without realizing that beneath all of that, there is an expectation being built. An expectation that at a specific moment, something will happen that places you in a position you didn't choose. And right before anything actually unfolds, there is always this brief, almost invisible phase where everything is ready. But nothing has been triggered yet, and that is usually the most deceptive part, because it feels like nothing is about to happen at all. At this stage, everything still appears normal on the surface, and that is exactly what makes it dangerous. Nothing has happened yet, no direct action has been taken, and if someone were watching from the outside, they would assume it is just an ordinary environment with ordinary interactions. People are still talking in familiar ways, still behaving within the boundaries of what looks socially acceptable, and still maintaining the appearance of neutrality. But underneath that surface-level normality, there is a subtle shift in how attention is being distributed. Certain pauses start to feel slightly longer than usual. Certain glances seem to land with more intention, and certain conversations begin to carry a quiet sense of direction rather than randomness. It's not obvious enough to confirm anything, but it is noticeable enough to create a small internal sense of imbalance if you are paying attention. And yet, most people don't question it, because human beings are naturally wired to trust the surface of social situations unless something forces them to do otherwise. This is what makes this phase so deceptive. The situation is already structured, but it still behaves like it is unstructured. There is no visible conflict, no direct statement, no clear indication that something is being prepared. Instead, what exists is coordination without exposure, intent without declaration, and alignment without explanation. People involved may not even consciously describe it as a plan, but their behavior starts to subtly reflect shared understanding. Timing becomes slightly more deliberate, reactions become slightly more synchronized, and attention begins to cluster around certain outcomes without anyone openly acknowledging it. From your perspective, however, nothing feels fully confirmable yet. You might notice small inconsistencies, brief moments where the energy feels different, or interactions that seem slightly rehearsed in hindsight, but none of it is strong enough to form a conclusion. And that uncertainty is exactly what keeps you from reacting early. Because without proof, the mind defaults to normal interpretation, and everything continues as if nothing is happening. Meanwhile, the structure behind the situation continues to solidify quietly. The expectation of a specific outcome begins to form among those involved, even if it is never spoken out loud. They are not acting randomly anymore. They are subtly orienting toward a shared moment that has not arrived yet. And this is where the tension builds most effectively, not in action but in anticipation. Because everything is ready to unfold, but still held in place just long enough for no one to fully realize how coordinated it has become. Then, almost without warning, the situation begins to move. Not in a loud or obvious way, but in small steps that feel natural enough on their own, that they don't immediately raise concern. A comment is made that slightly shifts attention in a particular direction. A moment is created where eyes naturally turn toward you. Or a conversation is steered just enough to place you at the center of focus without it seeming intentional. Individually, none of these actions look significant, but together they start forming a pattern that is hard to ignore once you notice it. The environment that felt neutral just moments ago now carries a subtle change in structure, as if something that was previously static has started to activate. And the most unsettling part is that it still doesn't feel openly hostile or directly confrontational. It feels staged in a way that is designed to look accidental, which makes it harder to immediately define what is happening in real time. This is where the intent behind the earlier silence starts to reveal itself through action. What was being prepared quietly is now unfolding in motion, and the goal becomes clearer through behavior rather than words. The situation is not about open conflict, it is about positioning, about placing you in a moment where your reaction becomes the focal point of attention. And because everything is happening in a social setting, perception matters as much as the actual event itself. The way others interpret what is happening begins to matter more than what is objectively true. That is why the timing feels so precise, because every small action is designed to guide attention toward a specific outcome without making it look forced. At this point, you may begin to feel the shift more clearly, even if you cannot fully articulate it. There is a growing sense that the environment is no longer neutral, that the flow of interaction is no longer random, and that something is quietly converging toward a single moment of exposure. But even then, it is still difficult to fully confirm intent, because everything continues to be wrapped in normal behavior. No one is openly stating what they are trying to achieve, yet the direction of the situation is becoming increasingly difficult to misinterpret. The pressure is not loud or aggressive, but it is focused, as if the surrounding energy is narrowing around a specific point in time. And once that point is reached, everything feels like it is about to resolve into a single outcome that has been slowly prepared from the very beginning. Just when the situation feels like it is about to reach its intended peak, something completely unexpected interrupts the flow. It doesn't arrive with drama or noise, and it doesn't announce itself as important in the moment, but its timing alone is enough to shift everything that was quietly building underneath. The direction of attention suddenly breaks. The alignment that had been forming among the people involved loses its precision. The moment that was being guided toward a specific outcome no longer follows the same path. And what makes this interruption so powerful is not what is said or done, but when it happens. Because timing in these situations is everything. A few seconds earlier or later, and the original outcome might have unfolded exactly as intended. But instead, something or someone steps in at the exact point where the situation is most fragile, where intent has not yet fully completed its expression, and where the structure is still dependent on momentum to succeed. That interruption doesn't need to challenge anything directly. It doesn't need to expose anything or argue against anything. Its presence alone is enough to break the psychological alignment that was holding the moment together. Suddenly, attention disperses in a way that cannot be easily controlled. People who were previously focused begin to shift their awareness elsewhere. The subtle coordination that was guiding the situation begins to lose coherence. And just like that, the pressure that was building toward a single outcome starts to collapse internally, without needing any confrontation at all. What was supposed to be a clean execution of a social moment now becomes fragmented, unstable, and uncertain. And the most interesting part is that most people involved may not even openly acknowledge that anything has changed. On the surface, everything still looks like normal interaction, but internally, the structure of the situation has already been disrupted. The expectation that was guiding behavior no longer holds the same strength. The narrative that was being formed loses its ability to fully develop, and the moment that was meant to define the outcome never reaches completion. The interruption doesn't need to explain itself, because its effect is already visible in how the energy of the situation shifts. What was once tightly focused becomes loosely scattered. What was once directed becomes uncertain, and what was once building toward a specific emotional or social result suddenly loses its path forward. Even those involved in the original direction may feel a subtle disconnect, a sense that something didn't go as planned, even if they cannot clearly identify where or how it changed. But by the time that realization begins to form, the moment has already passed. The structure has already broken. And what remains is a situation that no longer carries the same intent it was originally designed to deliver. After the interruption, everything doesn't collapse in a dramatic or obvious way. Instead, it settles into something far more subtle, almost like the situation simply loses its intended direction without anyone openly acknowledging it. On the surface, people continue behaving normally. Conversations still happen, expressions still move the same way, and from an outside perspective, nothing major seems to have changed. But internally, the structure that was being built no longer holds the same meaning. The momentum that was guiding everything toward a specific outcome is gone, and what remains is a kind of neutral afterstate where the original intention cannot fully complete itself anymore. This is often the part most people overlook because they expect situations like this to end with clear reactions or visible confrontation. But in reality, most social dynamics dissolve quietly when their core structure is broken. The expectation that was once shaping behavior fades, and people are left recalibrating without fully realizing they are doing it. Those who were involved in the earlier alignment may not openly admit that anything failed, but internally they recognize that the moment they were anticipating did not unfold the way it was supposed to. There is a brief confusion that follows, not strong enough to turn into discussion, but present enough to create awareness that something shifted. And yet, because there is no clear point of failure that can be openly identified, the situation never turns into a direct explanation. It simply disperses. Meanwhile, for the person at the center of it, the experience feels different in hindsight than it did in real time. What may have felt like tension or uncertainty in the moment now resolves into something quieter, almost like stepping out of a space where an invisible structure briefly existed and then disappeared. There is no dramatic resolution, no confrontation that ties everything together, just a fading of intent that never fully reached completion. And that is what makes these moments so psychologically interesting, because the mind naturally tries to assign meaning, even when the outcome does not provide one. People involved may replay the situation briefly in their thoughts, not because it was significant in a loud sense, but because it did not resolve in the way their expectations predicted. That small gap between expectation and outcome is often what leaves the longest trace, even if nothing externally important actually occurred. Over time, though, even that trace begins to dissolve as attention moves elsewhere, and the situation becomes just another unfinished moment in memory, something that never fully became what it was supposed to be. The interruption remains the defining factor, not because of what it added, but because of what it prevented from fully forming. And in the end, what stays is not a clear story of conflict or resolution, but a quiet example of how easily social outcomes can shift when the timing of a single moment breaks the structure that was holding everything together.